Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Ready for Rome orientation webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Shelley Ruel, and I'm the community manager at Italia Pass, and I have lived in Rome since 2001. So I'll be sharing some information about visiting Rome with you today. And I'm joined by my colleague, Lorian Filon, who is our Italia Pass Italy Experience Specialist. And we'll be telling you a little bit more about what Lorian does as the Italy Experience Specialist as we go along today. First of all, I wanted to give you a little overview of what is Italia Pass, because a lot of you are probably joining us today because you are Italia Rail customers. And we have a family of Italia brands, Italia Rail, Italia Tours, Italia Drive, and Italia Hotels. And they've been working with millions of tourists coming to Italy. And then our CEO decided that he wanted to help his customers have the best trip to Italy ever. So he created Italia Pass, which is a membership benefits program. It's $149 for $500 in value with the benefits that come with the program. So we'll be talking a little bit about that today throughout our presentation. But what we'll be covering today is information about visiting Rome. And so we'll start out with some information about your arrival at the airport, which is the code is FCO for Fiumicino Airport. It's also known as Leonardo da Vinci Airport, and how you can get into the city from the airport because it's located outside of the city center. We'll talk about our Italia Pass Lounge at Rome's Termini train station, and I will tell you a little bit about how to get around on public transport as well here in the city. A little bit about local customs, restaurants, menus, things that might be a little different than what you're used to. And we'll tell you about how to get a complimentary Colosseum entry and a $100 automatic refund for a Rome or Vatican tour, how to avoid some tourist traps, a couple of my local tips, and then at the very end, we'll open it up for 15 minutes for a live Q&A, which you'll be able to do in the chat function, and we'll explain how to do that at the end. So we'll get started, and Lorian will tell you about the airport and how to get into the city from the airport.
Absolutely. Hello everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. So now that you've landed at FCO Airport, you have a few options to get to the center of Rome. As you can see on the slide, they'll all be pretty well indicated in the terminal. And the first option is to reach Roma Termini, which is the main train station in Rome, by train. There are two types of trains that you can take. The first one is called the Leonardo Express, and it is a direct train to Termini station. It costs $16 on Italia Rail. And the second one is a more local train, and it'll get you to the smaller stations in Rome. So that includes Trastevere and Ostiense. So really your choice is based on where you'll be staying in Rome once you visit. And that option is $10 on Italia Rail. We generally get a lot of questions whether you should book these tickets ahead of your arrival or not. And I do recommend that you book them in advance, especially during the high season. So why that is because if you're going to be arriving at a set time and you want to have kind of the best experience and not be waiting for 2 hours for the next train or miss it if that is the case, that you're arriving a little bit later and you want to have that buffer. So it is really best to book them ahead of time from May to early October, which is the high season. I also recommend booking at least a train that's at least 1 hour and 30 minutes away from your landing time. So generally 1 hour, 30 minutes to 2 hours is best. As I mentioned, you might be missing your train otherwise. So that's not something we want to happen. And generally, you also have taxis that take you to the center of Rome outside the terminal with a fixed rate of 55 euros. And other options include taking a shuttle bus or booking a private transfer with us that takes you straight to your accommodations in Rome instead of directly to the train station, which is the case for trains, as I explained. And you can book it on Italia Tours, which is our website for tours, or through your dedicated Italy experience specialist like myself, if you are an Italia Pass member with us. Now as to car rentals, this is a question that comes up a lot, is if you should be renting a car during your trip. And the answer is that if you're going to be staying in the main cities, so Florence, Venice, Rome, Milan, generally I don't advise you to book a car just because it is hard to navigate these cities by car. There's a lot of regulations. It's hard to park. It's hard to get from one city to the other. And the best way is generally by train. There are high-speed trains that connect all these destinations. If you are going to be visiting some of the more remote areas like Tuscany, or you're going to be kind of, you want the flexibility to be going around the cities and outside of them, then renting a car is a great option. You can do so on Italia Drive, which you can see on the screen right here, where you can input your, trip information and dates, and then do a quick search, and it'll show you all the cars that are available. And Italia Pass members do get a $10 discount when they book through Italia Drive, so that's great. Now, for another great benefit of being a member is that you get access to our Italia Pass Lounge, which is located in the Roma Termini train station. And if you have some free time before or after boarding a train or waiting for your hotel check-in time, let's say, you can relax at the lounge, and it has free Wi-Fi, free espresso, refreshments, free luggage storage for your carry-on, and also your larger suitcases, which is really convenient. All you have to do is book ahead of time. The great thing also is that our lounge hosts can answer any questions you have about your train tickets, or if you have questions about your trip, they're generally really helpful. So it's a great place to stop by if you're going to be at the Termini station. And now I'll leave it to Shelley to give you some information on public transport within the city.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So public transport in Rome, the company is called ATAC. And we have three types of public transport methods. We have above ground buses. We have the underground, which is called the metro. It's short for Metropolitana. That's the subway. And there's only two lines, so it's super easy to navigate. There's line A and line B, and they only cross at one point. They cross at Termini train station, which we just mentioned, where the lounge is. So it's very easy to transfer from one line to the other. And there's also a couple of trams as well. The tickets are relatively inexpensive compared to other large European cities. They cost €1.50 each, and they're time limited tickets. So you don't have to worry about traveling to different zones of the city or things like that, or how many rides you can take with one ticket. It's unlimited rides for 100 minutes. And that 100 minutes starts on the first ride. So when, for example, if you board a bus and you have a paper ticket, you put it in the validation machine, you'll see there are these little yellow boxes on the buses. You're going to stick it inside the machine. The machine will pull it in, spit it back out. It'll be stamped with the time. And from that moment, you have 100 minutes to travel unlimited on all the methods of public transport. There's just one exception to that. And the exception is that on the metro for the subway, that ticket is only good for one ride. So what that means is you can ride as long as you want on the subway. You can cross, you can go from line A to line B. But the moment that you leave the subway station, that ticket is no longer valid for a subway ride. However, if it still has time left on it, you can use it unlimited on the buses and trams until that time runs out. Something that's very convenient, that's a relatively new development here with the public transport, is the tap and go system. So with that, you can use your contactless payment method. So either on your smartphone or a credit debit that has a contactless chip inside, you can just tap on the box, on the turnstile box at the metro, or on many buses now, they also have boxes on the buses where you just tap, it beeps, and that registers your contactless payment method as your travel ticket. And so if an inspector were to come on the bus and ask you to show your ticket, then you would just show your payment method, and that counts as your ticket. And it just automatically debits your payment method with 150 and then it's good for 100 minutes. The one thing I do mention to people is that you have to have one payment method, one card, or one contactless payment method for each individual rider. You can't buy multiple tickets with the same payment method. So for example, if you're going into the subway, each person needs to have their own card or their own contactless payment method because each one counts as its own ticket. And in terms of the inspectors, they sometimes board buses because you don't have to show your ticket when you get on the bus. You just board the bus. And then inspectors may periodically come and check. It's very random. But on the metro, there are really no inspectors because in order to board the metro, you have to go past the turnstiles for the ticket. Whereas on the bus, nobody checks. So you can just board the bus and they're trusting that you're going to have your ticket ahead of time. Or if you happen to have a bus with a tap and go, then you can use that when you're on the bus to buy your ticket. So tickets are called biglietto, and if you don't use one of these electronic methods, you can buy a paper ticket at ticket machines, which you'll find in the subway stations. You won't find those at the bus stops, but you'll find them at the subway stations. And then throughout the city at what are called tabaqueria, which are tobacconist shops, which you can easily locate because they'll have a sign above the door that has just like a black and white, like a T. It'll just have a T. And that's a place where you can buy bus tickets. And also at newsstands. There are newsstands everywhere throughout the city. And you can just ask for a biglietto and they will know what you're talking about. Or even a lot of the newsstands, they'll understand bus ticket. So that's no problem. You'll just get a couple if you're going, round trip, then you'll want to get 2 per person in your party. One bus route I did want to highlight for everybody is bus 64. It's super convenient for visitors to the city because it has its starting point and ending points are Termini Station, the main train station, and Vatican. So it crosses the entire historic center of the downtown, especially areas where there aren't metro stops. You can take bus 64 across the city. Which is super helpful because it'll cross by a lot of the large tourist areas that you'll probably want to visit. The only thing I do tell people to be aware of is that because it's so popular with visitors and tourists to the city, it's also a magnet for pickpockets. Now, if you're coming at this time of year, January, February, March, you're not going to encounter as many pickpockets as you would in the summer because the crowds just aren't quite as large. But it's always a good idea to keep aware of your belongings. So if you have a purse, wear it like a crossbody bag, and just keep your hands on your belongings. Make sure you're aware. If you don't look distracted and if you look like you know where you're at and you know where you're going, they're not going to bother you. The pickpockets prey mostly in crowded areas because it's very easy when you're being jostled around to not feel somebody bump you and try to take your wallet. Unfortunately, they're very, very skilled, so it can be really hard to tell if somebody's pickpocketing you. But I promise you that if you stay aware of your surroundings, you're not going to have any problems. They prey on distracted tourists, and you're not going to be distracted, so it's not going to be a problem. Knock on wood, I've lived here for 23 years. I've never been pickpocketed, not even once. And it's just because I'm aware of my surroundings. So if you are too, then you won't have anything to worry about. Rome is a very safe city. The only problem really for tourists is this problem of petty crime. Now on to some fun information. I'm excited for you to come to Rome and try all of our delicious food, local specialties. And I wanted to tell you a couple of things that might be a little bit different than what you're used to. We eat a little bit later than North American dining times. So lunch generally starts around 1 or 1:30 p.m. and dinner around 8 or 8:30. The reason I mention that is especially because if you want to go out and eat at a really authentic local restaurant and you're going at like 5:36, it may not be open yet for dinner. There are restaurants that cater to tourists that will be open, so it's not like you won't be able to get a meal. However, if you're going to go to a local Rome restaurant, then be aware that most Romans don't start eating dinner until 8 or 8:30 p.m. The reason I put check here on the bullet point is because something that's a little bit different than, say, for example, the United States is that the wait staff is generally never going to bring your bill or your check unless you ask for it. Whereas in the United States, a lot of times the wait staff will deliver your food and then put the check down and say, I'll take this when you're ready. Here it's the exact opposite. And that's a cultural thing. They do it out of respect because because culturally Italians go out to dinner with like friends and family, and it's a social time for them to spend quality time together. So the wait staff respects the fact that if you're at the table, you can stay as long as you like. This is generally true everywhere, unless you're at a super popular place where they'll tell you in advance they're turning tables at a certain time, but that's not very common. Generally, once you're at your table, you have it for as long as you want, which is why they're not going to deliver the check until you ask for it, because they don't want to disturb you and make you feel rushed. So I tell people this because sometimes people who are visiting think, gosh, why are they so slow? They're not bringing my check. It's actually that they want to respect your quality time with your dining companions. So simply ask for the check when you're ready to go and they'll bring it right away. It's called il conto. Tipping is another thing we get a lot of questions about. It may feel very strange, especially if you're coming from the United States, where tipping culture is very important because the wait staff depends on tips for their income. Whereas here, it's completely different. They're paid a regular salary, so tips don't figure into their income, which means that you don't need to tip at the restaurant. It's not expected. Um, it felt strange to me at first not leaving a tip, but don't worry because locals don't generally leave tips. If you really enjoyed your meal, feel free, but it's nothing like 20%. If you wanted to show courtesy, you might leave €1 per person, something along those lines. Same goes for taxis. We don't tip taxi drivers either. If you're paying in cash, it's courteous to round up to the next euro just so the taxi driver doesn't have to make change. But taxis take credit cards nowadays, so that shouldn't be a problem either. Next, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the restaurant menus, which might be different than what you're used to as well. The menus here have courses. You don't have to order every course. You can pick and choose. But what you're going to find generally is the antipasto, which are appetizers, and then you're going to see a section for primo and secondo. The primo or primi, which would be the plural, are the pasta dishes and risotto, so rice if they have that on the menu. And then the secondo will be the meat dishes. And you can order from all the different sections. You don't have to go straight down and order from all the sections. And if one person in your dining party orders a pasta dish and the other one just wants like a steak, they'll probably ask, do you want us to bring the primo and the secondo out together so you can eat together? And they'll have, they'll ask you how you want it all brought out so that you can all eat together. The pizzeria and Pizza al Taglio. So I wanted to mention about pizza because here in Rome, you may not find pizza in a ristorante. You may only find it in a pizzeria. So if you're really counting on you want to eat a pizza, look for a pizzeria. That's a sit-down pizza restaurant. And you're going to get served an individual sized pizza. So everyone gets their own pizza. And the Pizza al Taglio is like a street food pizza shop. So that's a little different. And I'll tell you how that works in just a second. But first, I want to talk about toppings in the pizzeria. So when you go out to a pizza restaurant, you're not going to do it like in the United States where you order all your different toppings and kind of compose your pizza the way you want and everybody shares it. Each pizza here already has a combination of toppings pre kind of set for that pizza, and each pizza has a name. So for example, a simple cheese pizza is called a margherita. And on the menu, you're going to see the name of the pizza and then all the toppings that go with that particular name of pizza. So you're going to order by the name of the pizza, and then the topping combination comes. You don't generally order the type of toppings that you want. The pizza, Roman style pizza, is a very thin crust. It's usually a wood-fired oven. So don't worry that you're going to get a huge deep dish individual pizza. You're going to be able to eat it. It's very thin, but it's quite large. It's the size of a normal plate. And it comes out uncut. So you'll just cut it yourself. Another thing I wanted to tell you about with pizza is that we have a very special appetizer here that's traditional only to Rome. It's called a supplì. That's what you see in that picture on the bottom right. It's delicious. You can also get it at street food walking around. This is an appetizer at a pizza restaurant. So it's rice with a ragu meat sauce, and they put mozzarella in the middle. They make a ball out of the rice, they bread it, and then they deep fry it. That's why you see the mozzarella is all melty. So try that because you won't be able to find it in any other Italian city generally. So last but not least on the pizza al taglio, like I said, is a street food kind of pizza. So there's pizza shops throughout the city, and you'll see pizza beneath a glass case, kind of like a cafeteria style. And that pizza comes sold by weight. So you may be used to these types of places ordering like, I want 2 pieces of pizza. Here it's not. They're going to, with their hands, kind of demonstrate to you how much do you want. And then based on what you say, they're going to cut it. They're going to put it on the scale, and it's cut into squares. And you can take it to eat just walking, or they'll put it in a box for you. And I would say the prices generally go between 5 and 10 euros per person, depending on what type of pizza. Each type of pizza has a different cost per, I think they weigh it by per 100 grams or per kilo, but In any case, 5 to 10 is probably a good estimate for the pizza al taglio, which literally means cut pizza. So that covers the food. Last but not least, I wanted to tell you about our coffee bars. So coffee here is way economical compared to what you might be used to at Starbucks. An espresso is €1, generally speaking, maybe a little bit more in the downtown area. So we call the coffee bar Il Bar, and that's a coffee bar. And the way it works is you have to pay first at the register for what you want to drink, and then you take your receipt over to the counter, to the coffee counter, and you tell the barista directly what you ordered. You put your receipt on the counter so they can see. So a cafe, if you order cafe, just so that you know, even though cafe literally means coffee, to an Italian, it means espresso. So if you order un cafe, they're going to give you an espresso. Just wanted to tell you, because sometimes people think, oh, if I just say cafe, they're going to give me an American coffee in a mug. But no, that would be an Americano. So that would be an espresso, and they'll add hot water to it. So cafe is an espresso. We do drink cappuccino for breakfast. You may have heard, no, don't ever order a cappuccino after a meal. That's generally true. Italians will not drink cappuccino after a meal. They drink it for breakfast and they drink an espresso after dinner. So at an authentic Roman restaurant, you'll never be offered a cappuccino after dinner, but they will ask if you want an espresso after dinner. And then as far as where are the best places to get espresso here in Rome, I am going to provide you with a list of resources at the end of this presentation. You're going to get an email with this video of this presentation and a list of resources. And I put 2 of the most famous espresso bars in Rome, so you can try both downtown and see which one that you like the best. All right, well, that wraps up for the restaurant section. I'm going to now pass it back over to Lorianne to tell you a little bit about getting into some of the most famous sites.
And I was muted. Sorry. And I swallowed wrong. So, some of the great, exciting sites that you'll get to see in Rome when you visit, hopefully, are the Colosseum, the Vatican, all of the general beautiful landmarks that are available in Rome. But as a member, you do get free access to the Colosseum. And we do have a perk where not only do you get access to Colosseum, but you get a free guided tour, which is really wonderful. And our tour guides have some of the best ratings. I really, really recommend doing that if you get the membership, and even if you don't, those are wonderful tours. Same thing with the Vatican. We have a lot of different tours of the Vatican, and you can use, as a member, $100 off on your first tour and 10% on any subsequent tours that you book. So those are great benefits. We also have, just to give you a little bit of an overview of our tour roster in Rome, we have a wonderful food tour of Trastevere, which is one of the most beautiful and fun areas of Rome, where you can discover a lot of the food that Shelley just mentioned. And it is a really, really highly recommended tour as well by our previous customers and our team. I highly recommend thinking to book those tours ahead of time. Again, especially during the high season, that's a must, especially for the Vatican. We're entering we actually are already in a Jubilee year, so there's less availability for the Vatican. For other landmarks in Rome, it might be more difficult. It might be more limited. So as soon as you know that you're going to be visiting and you want to see some of those sites, I suggest looking up those tours on Italia Tours, or reaching out to us if you have any questions, and we'll be very happy to help you. We do also, coming with the membership, the Italia Pass membership is a year-long subscription to our Italy magazine. So you get a lot of great insights on Italy in general, on what to do during your trip, but just general also information about the culture if you're really interested in that before your trip or after your trip, once you've been sort of blown away by everything that Italy has to offer. It's always great to learn more. So that does come with your Italia Pass membership. And there's some special editions, as you can see here, about the Vatican City and the Jubilee Year edition. So you get a lot of great and new information on Italy through that.
Okay, I'll come back in here and tell you a few tips to avoid typical tourist traps. So, the first one that I want to tell you about is having to do with restaurants. So, something that you will encounter if you're in some of the really busy tourist areas downtown are restaurants that have pictures on the menu. And that's always a tip off to a tourist oriented restaurant because, as you can imagine, Romans don't need pictures to show them what the food is on the menu. Another thing is what I call promoters. You'll see these people outside of the restaurant trying to kind of usher passersby to come in and eat at that restaurant. And again, a local restaurant would never need to do that because the local Romans know what restaurants they like and they don't need people to kind of ask them to come inside to eat. Now, are these bad restaurants? No, not necessarily. You'll probably get a fairly decent-ish meal. But the reason I pointed out as a tourist trap is because there's so many local places here. You're in Rome. Why not try somewhere that the locals would actually eat because you're going to get a more authentic meal. You're going to taste the food that the Romans actually eat and maybe not something that's kind of more generic. So if you can avoid these places because there's no reason not to. Most of the time, if you just walk down a couple blocks out of the main touristy areas, you'll find some smaller places where locals will eat. And I have a couple of places on the list that I'll provide with you. And some of the past Q&As that we've done with these webinars also have some suggestions there as well within the community. Next, you see this gentleman in the photo. I took that photo. He's dressed up like a gladiator with his suitcase. These are people who go down to the Colosseum to take pictures with tourists. And I call it a tourist trap because sometimes people don't know that they actually charge to have their photo taken with you. They might usher you over and be like, "Hey, you want a photo?" But like sometimes people don't know that they're doing that to make money. So the reason I mention it is because if you want to get a photo, if you're approached by one of these people, just agree on the price beforehand so that there's no unpleasant surprises. Same thing goes with these gentlemen you see with these bunches of roses. You're going to encounter these people probably more in the areas like Trastevere, which Lorian mentioned about the food tour in the evening. So Trastevere is also a very popular place to go out at night for restaurants, for bars. And so there's these people that go around with these big bunches of roses. And what they'll try to do sometimes is hand it to you and be like, "Here, it's a gift." Well, of course, it's not a gift. They want you to pay for it. I think the psychology behind it is if you've already got it in your hand, you might feel obligated to pay them for it. But the easiest way is just to avoid, just walk right by. They've got plenty of other tourists they can try to sell those roses to. Also, if you want to get flowers, you're going to see here in the city, there's tons and tons of really beautiful flower stands throughout the city. And you can get a really nice a bunch of flowers there if you're wanting to. Last but not least, gelato. I hope you're going to enjoy all the delicious gelato flavors that we have here. 2 tips to avoid not as authentic gelato as you might want to try. If you see the gelato like this, and you will see it downtown in the tourist areas, you're going to see certain shops that have these just piled high mounds of gelato, and it's like made to look so impressive. But what tourists a lot of times don't know is that that's not the type of gelato that an authentic gelataio would ever propose to his customers because it's whipped with a lot of air. And so it's less authentic and kind of more commercial. And so avoid that kind of gelato. Or if it has super bright colors, that's a tip off that it's artificial coloring because authentic gelato would never use food coloring. And so it's going to have a more muted color palette because it is using natural ingredients. And with the gelato, one thing I sometimes mention to people is that it gets ordered by the flavor. So usually it starts with 2 flavors and then goes to 3 or 4 flavors. I mention that because a lot of times in the United States you just get 1 flavor, but here it starts with 2, and that's how you order it, is based on how many flavors you want on your cone or your cup. Last but not least, a couple of local tips I like to share. So you see this fountain here in the photo on the upper right. This is known as a nazzone, or nazzoni plural. We have thousands of these fountains throughout Rome. The water runs continuously through them. It comes from a deep underground spring. It comes out ice cold, and it's a really convenient way for you to refill your water bottle without having to get plastic bottles. So just bring a refillable bottle. And in the resources list I'm going to provide, there's an app that the local water utility puts out for smartphones. And on the app, it will show you where all these nazzoni are located throughout the city. So that's convenient. You know where your next refill is coming from. And a super local tip is if you plug, because you see how the water's coming down, there's no on-off switch, it's just always running. If you plug the bottom with your thumb, there's a little hole on the top and it will shoot the pressure, the backflow of the pressure will shoot the water up. So like if you don't have a bottle, you can bend down to use it like a drinking fountain. I just always tell people to be careful there's no passersby because you could spray somebody if you're not careful. Last but not least, have an aperitivo. You may have seen this iconic drink that you see in the photo, the Aperol Spritz. Aperitivo time is a pre-dinner snack and drink, starts around 6:30, but places like Meccanismo, which I provide in the resources list, offer a really nice aperitivo for like 10 euros. You can get a bunch of snacks. You could almost make it dinner on its own. And the Aperol Spritz has a very low alcohol content, but there's also non-alcoholic drinks available as well. So that's a fun local tradition to try out when you're here. That wraps up the information part of our presentation today. Like I said, you're going to get an email that will have links to the resources, a recap of the Q&A that we're going to hold just now, and this recording. So if we went too fast, you can go back and look at the sections that you want to review. And you can also visit the community at ItaliaPass. Actually, you have to go to community.italiapass.com, and then you'll find the Ready for Rome orientation under the Italy travel planning section on the sidebar. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can go to the Q&A. So you'll see an icon on the bottom of your screen, the Q&A chat box. Just click on that and just type your question in if you have a question. And Lorianne and I will go through all the questions up to 15 minutes. And if we run out of time, then I will answer them offline and post them in the community. All right, so the first question that we have is, where is the best place to exchange dollars? Should I do it before I come? Do they take US credit cards? So in terms of exchanging money, I usually advise people against changing their actual physical US currency because the exchange rates are really unfavorable. You'll get charged high commissions. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. The best way that I advise people to do is to use their ATM card here in Italy. Draw your cash, your local euros out directly from the ATM machine. ATMs are called bancomat machines here in Italy. And I would just advise you to make sure that you're taking that money out of an actual Italian bank ATM. And the way that, as opposed to what are called like Euronet ATMs, which are specifically catering towards tourists, and those have really high commission charges. So just make sure that with your local bank in the US or wherever you're coming from, you can draw money out of the ATMs here, because I don't think it's worth it to take out to actually exchange currency. However, if you do want to exchange currency, you'll find a currency exchange right at the airport. You'll also find them nearest to the most touristy areas like Termini train station. You're going to find them in places like that. And then what was the other part of that question? Do they take US credit cards? At the exchange, I'm not sure. I don't know about that. I'm imagining you're saying, can I use my credit card to, but at that point you would just go to the ATM. You could just use your card at the ATM to get local currency out. All right. I'll take the next one, I guess, because it's a local question. I'll let you get the one after that. So this question is, are gluten-free and dairy-free options common for most restaurants? I would say not common for most restaurants. However, we have had this question in the past. And so on the resources list, I'll include several restaurants here in Rome that are certified by the national, I think it's the National Celiac Association. They're certified gluten-free, and they have to follow standards to make sure that the kitchens are gluten-free. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, they're becoming more common, I would say. Like I'm thinking about certain pizza restaurants, they're becoming a lot more common, but I wouldn't say it's to the level that you might find in the United States. Dairy-free, it's hit or miss. At the bar, for example, if you want to get a cappuccino with soy milk, that's becoming a lot more common. You can ask for that. So you can try and ask, just see. It's becoming more common than it was in the past.
Great. Backpacks are not allowed when visiting the Vatican. So no, any large bags when visiting the Vatican is not going to be allowed in. You have to go through security when you get to the Vatican, and unfortunately, they do not allow large, personal belongings. So the general suggestion is to have something close to you that's small. So like a cross shoulder bag or something like that that's quite small, where you can have some of your personal belongings but not be not be refused entrance in these landmarks because of a large backpack.
All right, this question says, we are going next week. What kind of bike rental options are available? So there are bike sharing, there's bike sharing, and I'll put that in our Q&A recap. You'll get a link to it. So I will list for you the bike sharing you can just put on your smartphone if that's something you're interested in. Those bikes don't have helmets, so that's just something to take into consideration. Rome is not a bike friendly city. I'll be honest with you. It's not a bike friendly city because there just aren't hardly any bike paths anywhere. And as you probably seen or can imagine, the traffic here is completely nuts. So I don't feel that it's extremely safe to ride a bike on the main city roads. However, there are some really nice places you can take excursions with bikes. So like the Via Appia Antica, the Appian Way, they have bike rental services right there at the beginning of the Appia Way, and you can rent bikes, and that's a completely like pedestrian only. It's the ancient Roman road. That's a beautiful place to have a bike excursion. And I will also list for you some of the bike rental shops. Most of them are down by the Termini train station.
For the Roma Termini Lounge, the only way to get in is to book online, yes. To book ahead of time. If you're the only way to get in it as well is if you're a member. This is a benefit of being an Italia Pass member. So if you are, you're gonna be receiving, or if you've already received, a welcome email with that information and a link on how to book your stay at the lounge.
All right, the next question says, as for espresso in the afternoon, I understand no cappuccino, but can you get espresso with milk at all? I love my after lunch coffee. That's a great question. That's something I didn't mention. Absolutely. In fact, I almost always get an espresso with a little milk in it. I don't usually get a straight up espresso. So the name of that is macchiato. It's called a caffè macchiato. Macchiato means stained. And the reason they call it a stained coffee is because it's stained with milk. So it's going to be an espresso with just a little bit of foam milk inside. And if you want something that has chocolate in it, that's also a mini coffee, you can order a Marocchino. Marocchino is it's a macchiato, so it's an espresso with foamed milk, but they also put chocolate. Sometimes if they have it at the bar, they'll put chocolate syrup on the inside of the glass. It comes in a little shot glass, and they'll put cocoa powder on top, and you can stir it up and it becomes like a little mini mocha. So those are culturally acceptable ways to have milk in your coffee. But sometimes Italians at the bar, I mean, at a restaurant, you're not going to order cappuccino after a meal. However, at the bar, I do see Italians sometimes getting like a cafe latte in the afternoon. Generally, cappuccino is not really in the afternoon, but I have seen people getting a cafe latte. It's rare, but you're a tourist, you can get away with it. But if you want to be super local, yeah, go with the macchiato or the Marocchino.
Um, so the next question is about Cielo Blue, so it's pretty specific. The only thing that I can tell you, Tina, is that the Italia Rail team should be able to assist you with this. If you've booked on the Italia Rail, you have the information. You have the phone number and the info at italiarail.com. I know that Sailor Blue is an entity of itself, so we might have to call them, or you might have to call them in order to get more information on that, unfortunately. But generally, we do get more information. So I suggest reaching out to the Italia Rail support team, because unfortunately, we don't deal with rail directly that is booked online.
Okay, the next question is how far is the cab from the train station to the Westin Excelsior Hotel and how much does it cost? I don't know that off the top of my head, but I will go ahead and look into it and I'll try to get you an answer on the recap of our Q&A.
Camera in the Vatican. Jenna, I think so. Without flash, probably
Flash,
show
I
you.
think
Yeah,
I think so too. I generally think that you're allowed to take photos as long as there's no flash.
you're definitely allowed to take photos, but I do not know about the flash. But generally, I think that's not
Yeah,
something
I've
that's
almost
allowed.
never, yeah, that's almost a general rule in all the museums, no flash allowed. Um,
Yes.
Early March, coat weather or jackets? I would have to look up the exact temperature. Italians always dress like a lot warmer, in my opinion, than the season. That's just kind of a European Italian thing. The reason I say that is because in March, sometimes I've been known to wear short sleeves in March with no coat. And I get chided by the Italians. Oh my gosh, cover up. But I think you can get by with a light coat layering, just layering. But you're certainly in March, you're not going to need the big puffy coats they wear in January and February around here. And in the Q&A recap, I'll give you the average. I'll look it up and give you the average temperatures in March because it depends. I mean, everybody's tolerance for heat and cold is a little different. So if you know the temperature, then you'll be able to better plan what is best for your style. Bike is for riding.
Um,
Oh, yeah, I'll get this one because it's a local one. Bike is for riding with daughter who runs on Tiber in the morning. Okay, that's good that you brought that up because contrary to what I said about Rome not being a bike-friendly city, you're right. There are actual bike paths down on the banks of the Tiber River. That's actually a good place to go bike riding. So you're good for bringing that up because that's an okay place and it's not crowded and there's obviously no cars down there. So there's actual dedicated jogging and bike paths. What about restrooms? Are there plenty and do they cost? This is a good question. We get this often. So Rome doesn't really have public restrooms, like paid coin public restrooms like you might find in other European cities. Like Amsterdam, for example, has them a lot, like all over, and they're like €1. Rome, instead, what we do when we need to use the restroom when we're out and about is we duck into a bar, a coffee bar. So I would suggest that you go into the nearest coffee bar, buy something small like a pack of gum or a bottle of water. A bottle of water is like €1, and then ask them to use their restroom. That's the courtesy that we do when we need to use a restroom. I also advise people to carry like a little package of tissues in their purse or backpack because a lot of times, sometimes the restrooms may not have toilet paper, so it's convenient to have that on hand. So yeah, Rome is a little bit primitive when it comes to public restrooms, unfortunately. You'll be very local.
on the trains, a safe place to store luggage. So there are compartments to store your luggage on trains. Generally, my advice is to not have too much luggage if you're able to. It's not that it's unsafe or that your luggage is going to get stolen. It's just that there's not a lot of space on trains. So you might have to have your luggage further away, and that's when issues could arise, or you don't want to be far from your luggage. So the less amount of luggage you have, the better. But yes, there are safe spots to store your luggage on the trains. And what's the best way to get from Roma Termini to your hotel? So that depends where your hotel is. I would say there's a lot of public transportation if you're comfortable with that, or there are taxis that you can call. I know that Rome is Uber, I believe, right, Shelly?
Rome
I
has
think it
Uber, and
works.
there's a taxi stand right in front of Termini Station, so you can just get in line. They'll pull right up.
Exactly. And we also provide private transfers. So let's say you have a lot of luggage or you just want the peace of mind of having something arranged ahead of time, you can reach out to us and we can arrange for that private transfer for you from the station, from the train station to your hotel. Um, Also, if you have big bags and you leave them at the locker for more than 2 days at the Termini lockers. I don't know if you're able to leave them for more than 2 days at the lockers in Roma Termini. There are lockers in each of the main train stations that can be booked. I'm not sure about 2 days. I'm sure that it's probably possible, but it's not the best option. If you remember with us again, not to add to that, but there's a lounge that we have at Termini that you could store your luggage. And you can let us know. We do have something for luggage overnight and multiple days, I believe. So that could be an option.
Anthony's asking, where can I get smaller denomination bills? I have €100 banknotes. So let's see. That's, yeah, you're not going to want to go in with like a small purchase and try to change a 100, especially here in Rome. They get really weird about change. Even like a 50 can be really hard to break for a small purchase. They're really weird about it. They like small bills. So my advice to you, if you have €100 bills, wait. I mean, this might sound like common sense or like a not maybe not work, but wait until you have like a big purchase to make where they're going to have to give you not very much change back. Other than that, maybe you could try going into a bank and see. I mean, I don't know. Um, yeah, I think my best advice would just be wait until you have to purchase something that's €50 or more and use the big bills for that. And not knowing how many that you have, but I don't know that it would be worth it to go to a currency exchange place because they're probably not going to want to change that for you. So maybe at a restaurant, maybe paying for a restaurant bill, something like that. Oh, you can take this next one.
Yes. Is it true that we need our knees covered in some menus? So for the Vatican and other main religious landmarks like Duomos, for example, yes. So you would need to have your shoulders and knees covered. So the best thing to have is if you're visiting, especially in the summer, it can be tricky, but you can wear long pants and then have something in your bag like a sweater or something to light to put over your shoulders. Obviously, if you're visiting right now, you won't have that issue because you'll probably have everything that you need on yourself. But yes, the Vatican especially is very strict about that.
Okay, I'll let you take this. Will be our last question, and then if you have other questions, feel free to type them in right now, and then I'll answer them offline.
And what would you recommend for getting data in the city? We've been looking into eSIMs. Is that a good option, or would you recommend purchasing them in the city? I think if you're only going to want data, it's best to get an eSIM ahead of time. That way you can set it up at home and activate it once you land, and you get the amount of data that you've chosen. You don't have to run around to get a SIM card or to deal with that. So one really great app that I use, just as a reference, we don't have anything to do with them, but they're called Airalo. And I think, Shelly, you've had that question before, and maybe it's in
Yeah.
your
I
in
think
your
we have that in
resources.
a past resource, so I'll just bring it back into this because we're going to have the recap of this Q&A. So I'll send you that link. Everybody who's registered for this webinar is going to get those links. So be looking at your email inbox and you will have those links coming shortly. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. We hope you have a wonderful trip to Rome. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us at the community, or if you're an ItaliaPass member, reach out directly to your ItaliaPass Italy Experience Specialist, and they will be happy to help. Have a great trip.
Thank you. Happy travels.